This is AndyTube. In this video, I'm going to show you how to check and set the hook timing on a Singer Model 403A slant needle machine. Now, the method of setting the hook timing depends on the mechanics of the machine, what drives the hook. And in this model and in the slants, it's all gear driven. We have a vertical shaft with a gear that mates up with a horizontal hook drive shaft that ends in a gear that mates with another gear at a 90-degree angle, and centered in that gear is the actual shaft of the hook. So this requires one method of setting the hook to needle point timing. But other machines are, say, a bell crank oscillating hook drive, and that uses a little bit different method. And then there's many Singer machines that have a timing belt underneath with two pulleys that power the hook, that drive the hook. And that takes a little bit different method of timing. So in the description below the video and at the end of the video, I'll put links to other videos I have done for those type, like a 327 or 337 oscillating bell crank hook. I'll do one for the 99K machine, which has a little bit different type of needle height setting and hook drive. And I'll do one to maybe like a 347, which is a belt and pulley system. So that'll give you opportunities. If you came here looking about timing and you see this machine and say, well, I don't have gears like that, I have a belt, or my hook is different, it's oscillating bell crank, you can find links to my videos that show you how to do that. Okay? But one thing that's common with all of those mechanic different types is that the needle height has to be set properly before you check and or set the timing. Yeah, because the needle is timed with the hook, but everything is timed. Also, the hand wheel is timed for all that. You know, the hand wheel turns, whether it's a belt drive or motor drive. The hook goes up and down. I mean, the needle bar goes up and down. The hook rotates or oscillates. And, you know, that's even timed with the feed, right? The machine has to feed the fabric under the needle all in time. And even your take-up lever is timed to coordinate with all this. So it has to start out with the needle bar at the correct height. Okay? And there's a very simple test. Most of the Singer machines I've done have this kind of height setting procedure. A difference would be the 99K, which has timing marks, but they're not on the needle bar. But most of them have these timing marks on a needle bar. And they're going to be two little bands etched right in all the way around the needle bar. And the higher mark, you know, the needle bar's like that, so the higher mark is to help you set the height of the needle. Once that is set, you can use the lower mark to set the position of the needle bar and needle to the hook. But you have to start with checking the height. So now you know what I'm going to be looking at here, okay? And to set it or check the height, we want to lower the needle bar to the lowest position. Now you can see down here, I took off the slide plate, I took off the needle plate, and I took off the feed dog because I can give you a better view of what's going on down here. It's not really required that you take off the feed dog, so if you don't like to do that, I understand. If you want a better view while you're working on the timing, especially if you have to change it, then for me it's worth taking off the 2 screws and removing the feed dog. So you have to rotate the hand wheel towards the sewer, and you have to get it turned so it's at the lowest point possible. And you can look down here and see when your, you know, like your needle clamp and everything is at the lowest point. You can also, I kind of like to look up here at the needle clamp here that goes into the take-up system, because it kind of gets to the bottom and rocks a little bit. See? Okay, once it's there, now this is when you have to look at the bottom of the needle bar bushing. In this machine, the bushing is inside the casting, and you don't really see it. You don't see it up here, and it's very hard to see down here. Some machines, the bushing is made so it's exposed and it's easier. But when your needle bar is at the lowest point, that top timing mark needs to be right up parallel with the bottom of the bushing. And the bushing is some type of metal tube that the needle bar goes up and down through, and it guides it. Okay, so we don't look at the top mark compared to the casting or the body. We look at the top timing mark compared to the bottom of the metal bushing. So you really need to get way under here, and I need to raise my camera right, and you need to be able to see up under here to see that timing mark. And let me show you a close-up picture I tried to take of this that shows the 2 timing marks, and it shows the top mark up very close to the bottom of the metal bushing. Okay, that gives you a little bit better idea there, right? Now you see there's a little space between the timing mark and the bottom of the bushing. And the space you see in my photograph is about the farthest that timing mark should be from the bushing. It can be closer. I've moved it a little closer where there's just barely any sign of the silver needle bar between the bushing and the top timing mark, like a little sliver. And I've adjusted them where that black timing mark is starting to disappear into the bushing. You don't see any silver. You still see the timing mark there, but you don't see any little sliver of silver between it and the bushing. Now, normally you should see some of the silver between the timing mark and the bushing. But every machine is a little bit different, and especially when you get into a vintage machine. Like this machine is what, 60 years old? So, you know, it's got some wear and so forth, and every machine can adjust a little bit different. And your machine may be a space like I put in the photograph, or it may need to have the timing mark a little bit closer to the bushing, or almost into the bushing, or barely into the bushing. But a very good place to start is what you see in that photograph, a tiny amount of silver showing between the top timing mark and the bottom of the bushing. It's a very good place to start. Okay. Now what if your needle bar height is off? Then you have to raise or lower the needle bar. Now on this machine, in this clamping right here that goes back into the counterweight and works with the take-up, the screw is on the side. The screw is over here. And I don't have any kind of a tool that can get in there with a screwdriver blade and loosen the screw. Now you may have a needle bar clamping screw that's right in the front, dead ahead, just like this one for the presser bar. You'll see one dead ahead for the needle bar, and those are the easiest. But the idea is that if your needle bar is set too high or too low to that top timing mark, you've got to do whatever you need to do to loosen the clamping screw that's holding the needle bar in position, so that you can move the needle bar up and down a little bit. So like on this 403 here, it's a kind of a hassle. I have to loosen it enough to be able to move the needle bar, but I leave it kind of snug because I don't want the needle bar moving around after I get it in position, because I have to lower it back down all the way. And I don't want it to slip while I'm lowering it. And you know, I check it and say, okay, I'm going to move it. I need to move my needle bar up a little bit. It was too low. Now I need to gently raise it up so that I can get my screwdriver back on here to firmly tighten that screw. Okay? But wherever your screw is, that's how you would change the height of the needle bar. Okay? Is you put the needle bar all the way down, top timing mark should be just barely below the bushing. Now when that is set, whether you find it that way or you change it that way, the way that you check the hook point to needle point timing is that you have, if possible, a number 18 needle, size 18, in your machine. If your machine isn't made for a size 18, it almost certainly is made for a size 16. You can do it with a 14 or 12, but it's just a little tiny bit more accurate. That's what Singer recommended on this machine, was 18. So you have your needle properly installed in there, and you've got your timing, top timing mark. They call it a timing, but let's call it the top height mark, perfectly positioned. You know your needle bar's at the right height. you're going to continue turning that hand wheel towards the front of the machine so that on the uptake, the upstroke of the needle bar, you turn it a tiny bit until the bottom true timing mark is up at the place the height mark was. So the bottom mark now needs to be just a little below the bottom of that bushing. And again, not the casting, not this beige part down here. I'll show you the picture. You can actually see like a black metal bushing in there with the needle bar coming out of it. And that's where now the second one should be. So let me rotate it. And it's just a tiny bit of space between the two. Okay. Let me show you the picture, how that's going to look then. Okay, now with the needle bar in that position, we need to look down at our hook and needle point and see, is my hook point directly, I mean perfectly, behind and it's going to help you, believe me, to have some kind of a bright light to get in there, because it's shady, you know, it's dark in there. You've got other parts here kind of in front of the hook. If you still have your feed dog on, you're going to kind of be looking down between the toes, and that's going to cast more shadows. So you want to be directly in front of that needle, and you want to see the hook point right behind it. And by the way, on most machines, when it is proper, that hook point will be right behind the needle, and it will be about a 1/16 inch or less above the eye of the needle, where the thread would come through. So if you set your height mark, looks good, and then you turn the hand wheel a little bit more, right, you're down, oh, my height's good. You turn it up a little bit until that lower timing mark is up by the bushing. You look in here and you say, wow, I see what he means. The hook point is just like right behind that needle. Perfect. Wow, it looks great. You're done. You're timed. If you're having stitching problems or skipping and stuff like that, it's not from the timing, because you just verified it's good. But if your hook point is not to the needle point yet, or if your hook point went past the needle point, then you're out of time and you need to re-time. Ta-da! So I'm going to tell you how to do that here. Okay, so here I am. I have laid the machine on its back so I can work on the bottom, because this is where you change or set the timing, is down here. And I haven't found a better way to do it than laying it on its back. And when I do this, I can stand up over it and look straight down at my needle point and hook point from up above. So I make changes here, then I have to look down up here and down into the hook and at the hook point and needle point. Okay? So what happens for this type of gear-to-gear system is you actually loosen this gear here so that you can turn the hook gear and move the hook point into the correct position without moving these gears, which would go up and across and move your needle up and down. That's all timed, right? So when you have to retime, you have to separate the timing of the needle going up and down and the hook going around, right? Pat your head and rub your tummy. You have to separate that, so when you put your needle in the correct position, you can come and turn this gear to turn the hook to match your needle. See, if I turn this now, do you see how all these gears move? And that means that my needle bar is going to be going up and down too. So, got to break this connection. Okay? And on this gear, there are 2 set screws that hold it to the shaft. One there and one there. Okay? And I've got to loosen those set screws and kind of get that gear loose on this shaft so I can operate this independent. Here's a close look at this gear. Okay, so there you see this. You see the set screws now, right? Now these can be in there very good, very tight. I like to use my little mini ratchet from my Chapman Manufacturing, because I can get a angle on it. You know, I can get some torque on it here. You can use a 1/4-inch socket if you have. You can use your screwdriver if that's all you have. If they really fight you, don't be shy about putting some kind of penetrating oil on them, or heating them up a little bit with your hair dryer or heat gun and letting them cool back down. Sometimes that expand and contract can loosen things a little bit. But you need to go in here and loosen one of the set screws and, you know, turn it a couple times to get it away from the shaft inside, and then rotate it to the other set screw, and you need to break it free and loosen it a few turns. Okay, so if you are lucky, you can now like hold that gear or hold the shaft and see if they will turn independent. See, watch. I can turn the shaft now. This gear will not move, but my hook gear will, because I've separated the connection here. See the hook gear? But see, this isn't moving. Okay. Now, do not be surprised that even though you loosen the set screws, or you even take them all the way out, that the gear is like stuck on this shaft because of old oil or grease or dirt. And the gears get hot. These gears get hot when they run. And anything you got inside on the shaft kind of gets like baked on there. So I can't tell you how many emails I've got. Hey, I took the set screws all the way out and I can't, it's stuck. I can't can't separate the movement. I can't get it loose. You know, what should I do? So wow, okay. So what I recommend at that point is do take the set screws all the way out and spray some type of penetrating oil in each of the holes. Because when you take that set screw out, you're going to see the shaft going through there. So at least you can get some oil right on there. And again, I use a hair dryer. I know people have told me they can safely use a heat gun and kind of heat it up and try and loosen whatever is making the gear stick. Okay. Now there's been a couple times, I hesitate to tell you this, but there's a couple times that I've been desperate, and after a couple of days of oiling and heating and tapping even, it's like, man, I cannot get this thing off. I have taken a little screwdriver in here, you know, and I've rocked it back and forth until I could move it. Now it doesn't move far because it's mesh with this gear. Okay, so you see, move it back against the bushing and then move it away. Usually once you get whatever is in there that's stuck softened up, you'll feel it start to move, and then you can move it more. And you can grab this gear over here and turn it, you know, while the gears are sharp themselves, so be careful. While you try and hold this gear until you can like get it free. These were kind of gummy, so I didn't have to use any penetrating oil, but at first they didn't want to move, and I just kept twisting and working a little bit, and then I felt them barely move, so I just kept back and forth, and it was just, I could feel it, and then it finally got loose, and now of course it's very loose. Right, I can turn this very freely without these moving. Okay, so once you've accomplished that, what we need to do is re-look at your needle, because all this fooling around that you did before to loosen those set screws, you know, turn this, turn that, get to the other set screw, right? That totally messed up the height of your needle. So you're going to need to look down on the front of the machine here and turn your hand wheel so that that bottom timing mark is up near the bushing. Okay, so I'm going to do that. I've got like my little bright LED light here. Put it on its brightest setting, and I'll try not to bump the camera here. And I'm going to go up, and actually I'm going to move this closer because it's too far back. And I'm going to look down the top, set my needle at the low point, and if it won't go low, it's because this hook is in the way. So move the hook a little bit. My needle's hitting the hook. There. Okay, I found a good spot. Now I can bottom out my needle and then keep turning so that on the up stroke, right there. Okay. Now I'm going to look down. I don't know of a way to film this for you guys, but my hook point is way to the right. It's way to the right. So I'm going to turn this gear. So I'm going to rotate it until the point of the needle is behind Now the point of the hook, the point of the hook is behind the needle. And I don't want to see the point of the hook poking out on the left side of the needle. It's got to be right behind the needle for the most accurate setting. Phew! Okay. Now the trick is, everything has to stay there while you come back over here and you tighten these set screws. Now, before I go ahead and tighten up the set screws on that gear and everything, I wanted to show you what I do, because I'm usually doing this after I've cleaned the machine. And when you have that gear down there disconnected, you've taken all the weight and everything on the bottom end off of the vertical shaft and the arm shaft and so forth. So sometimes this needle bar or the hand wheel can turn a little bit while you're turning the machine over and unscrewing the set screws and messing around, resetting the hook and stuff. So to prevent that, once I have the needle bar up right at the timing mark where I want it, what I'll usually do is wrap a rubber band around the two bars here like this, just to put a little bit of tension. And let me hook that over the thumb screw on the needle clamp, just to put a little tension on there, so now it's not going to slip. So that way I feel more assured that, I went to all this trouble of setting the needle bar height with the lower hook timing mark right up there at the bushing. Now it's going to stay that way. Okay, so I meant to show that earlier, and I just remembered. So let me flip this machine over there and we'll go back to tightening the gears. Okay, so here you are now. You've got your needle bar set at the hook timing mark. You've turned your gear and turned the hook, so the hook point is directly behind the needle. Now you want to lock it all together. You want to put it all back together so that the timing of everything is there. When you do this, you're usually going to have access to at least one of the set screws, depending on your machine. Like I have one is down here at the bottom, and then I have this one up here that I can angle in and get a screwdriver on. So I'm just going to tighten that up. Now I'm not going to tighten it 100%. I'm just going to kind of snug it up there, and then I'm going to rotate my hand wheel so I can get access to the other one, and tighten that up. And there's a thing here that you have to be aware of. When you go to tighten this up, you have to have a space here between this bushing on the left and the hub or the bottom of this gear. You don't want those two to touch. Not only might you get some noise, but I told you these create a lot of heat. So you want to nudge this gear into the other gear so that the teeth mesh. You don't want to have it too loose, or you get what is called play, and they can jitter and not mesh well. If you jam it over there to the right into the other gear and tighten it, you can have binding where they're so tight that the motor is struggling to turn everything, and that's going to bind down the machine. So you want to be aware of that. You want to pay attention to that. okay, that you don't want. Now you notice I can turn this still while I have the rubber bands on there. So I'm just going to just gently nudge this over. Look, I could do it just with my fingertips, see? Could just kind of move it over, make sure it's against the other gear, rotate a little bit, make sure it's against the other gear, okay. Now I want to go ahead and firmly tighten these set screws so that my gear won't be loose in the future. So I'll just go in here with my little ratchet and give it a good crank now. And I will go back to the other set screw and give that a good crank. And there. So we're good now. We're very good. Right? So I'm going to set this up and take a look up here on the top. And I can take off my little rubber band holder thing. And I can verify. I'm just going to peek up under there and get my timing mark in the right place again. And then I'm going to take my little I'm just verifying that I did a good job here, so make sure my hook is right behind the needle. Good. And then I'm just going to turn the hand wheel and make sure that it's, you know, it still operates smoothly, that I didn't bind those gears together. Okay? Yay. So, now if you want, you can put your needle plate back on here and thread up your needle. And matter of fact, why don't I do that? Let me set it up to show you. We're going to check the timing to make sure that the hook can grab the needle thread. Okay. So I put the needle plate back on and I've threaded up the needle. And I'm just going to hold the thread like this and turn the hand wheel the same way I would do if I was going to pick up my bobbin thread from a new bobbin. But this is just testing the timing to see when the hook point comes by, is it going to grab that thread. Whoops, maybe if I put the pressure bar down, get a little tension on there so it's more normal. And there we go. See, it's grabbed the thread. Hook has it. It's going to take it around to the cast off point and then let it go. So that's just a little timing test you can do anytime if you think you have a timing problem. And I do that like when I'm inspecting a machine, you know, that I'm thinking about buying from Craigslist or an estate sale or garage sale, something like that. If I'm buying, I think that is going to cover it. The checking and setting the timing on a Singer Model 403A special slant needle and many other machines. Same principles. Like I said, at the end of the video there I can put some links. So I'll put links to other styles, other machines that I've timed, where the bottom mechanics are a little bit different. So you may find your style of machine in one of my other videos there. So there we go. Thanks a lot. Hope you come back and see me, and take care. Here's a little extra bonus content. Since we were talking about set screws and shafts and gears and stuff, I wanted to mention this. In general, when you have two set screws like this on a part, that almost always means that you're putting it on just a round, completely round shaft. Now this one's got some scratch marks from the set screws and so forth, but that, since it's round, that's why you need two, so it'll go on evenly and it won't turn. So we tighten one, we tighten both, we tighten them equally. That centers the gear onto the shaft and keeps it from spinning. Now the gear on the other end only had one set screw. I really didn't show you that, but it only had one. And when it only has one, you're going to find a flat spot on the round shaft. You see where they've ground this down, and there's a flat spot right there, and you can see the mark in the middle from the set screw. And they do that when they're only using one set screw, so the gear can seat properly and one set screw can hold it because it's on a flat spot. Okay, but this one they had to use two and round, because when you time the hook and everything, you've got to be able to turn this shaft to wherever, you know, it moves the gear and moves the hook to your needle, right? It could be anywhere. So if you had a flat spot in a certain place on this end, it wouldn't work. So that's why the gear on this end has two set screws and just a perfectly round shaft on the end, and this one only needed one set screw and a flat spot. There we go. Thanks again. See you next time.